Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. It was late when I got the call. The voice on the other end sounded distant, emotionless, as it confirmed my worst nightmare. His car had crashed. They found it engulfed in flames, with no survivors. The tears didn't stop. My husband, my best friend, my love, was gone. Just like that. It felt unreal. I couldn't breathe. How could this happen? How could I wake up tomorrow without him? I held onto the phone, trying to make sense of the words I had just heard. I don't remember much from those first days. It's all a blur of tears, empty rooms, and silence. I felt like I was drowning in sorrow. I would never hear his voice again. No more shared jokes or dreams. My heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest, and I couldn't put it back together. I cried for hours each night, searching for some meaning, some reason. But nothing made sense. He was just gone, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered life. The funeral was the worst. The casket sat there, empty. No body to mourn. No closure. People whispered their condolences, but all I could do was stare at the closed lid. I couldn't understand why he was taken so suddenly. I whispered my love into the void, hoping somehow, somewhere, he could hear me. I felt the eyes of everyone on me, but they couldn't see my pain. No one could understand what I was going through. How could they? They didn't lose him like I did. The days that followed were an endless haze. Every room in our house felt foreign without him in it. I would sit on the couch, his favorite spot, and feel the emptiness consume me. His scent still lingered in the sheets, and his clothes were untouched in the closet. I didn't know how to live without him. But the worst part? The haunting loneliness that crept in at night. I would clutch his shirt, wishing for a sign, anything, to tell me he wasn't really gone forever. I never expected what happened next. It was just another sleepless night when I was scrolling aimlessly through social media, trying to distract myself from the constant ache. But then, I saw it. A photo. His face. My heart skipped a beat. I blinked, unable to believe my eyes. Was it a mistake? A look-alike? I squinted at the screen, and my breath caught in my throat. It was him. Alive. He was smiling, holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize. He was supposed to be dead. I clicked on the photo, my hands shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone. His face was unmistakable. The smile, the eyes, the way he tilted his head. Everything was the same. But it couldn't be. He had died. He had burned to death in that crash. But there he was, alive and well, living a life I wasn't a part of. The woman next to him seemed so happy, so in love. I couldn't breathe. Was this a sick joke? Or had my entire life been a lie? I stared at the profile, trying to make sense of it. The name said Daniel Carter, but I knew better. My husband's name was Ethan Barnes. This was no coincidence. I zoomed in on his face, searching for any hint of recognition. But it was him. No doubt. The stranger beside him seemed happy, tagging him as the best partner ever. My heart twisted in knots. How was this possible? He was supposed to be dead. How could he be living this new life? The questions kept piling up. The more I scrolled through his photos, the more the reality of what was happening hit me. There were pictures of them traveling, laughing, celebrating birthdays. The life I thought we'd have was being lived by someone else. By him. It wasn't just a casual acquaintance or a look-alike. It was my husband, smiling as if he had never known pain, as if he had never been married to me. I felt like I was intruding on a life that should have been mine. The betrayal ran deeper than I could have imagined. Could I be mistaken? My mind raced with doubt. It seemed impossible. Could I have imagined it all? Maybe it was someone else who just looked like him. I decided to check again. I searched for more pictures, more posts. And there he was, again and again. Daniel Carter. But he looked the same. He couldn't be real. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a mistake. My husband was alive. And he had built a new life without me. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I was desperate to make sense of what I was seeing. So I looked at the comments on his photos. People were congratulating him. Daniel, you're the best. Lisa is so lucky to have you. Lisa? Who was this woman? The more I read, the more it became clear. He wasn't just alive. He was living a new life. With someone else. He had a wife, another wife. And what about me? Did he ever think of me? Or was I just a chapter he wanted to forget? I clicked through more posts, my pulse racing. Lisa and Daniel were inseparable. Vacations, dinners, holidays. Their life seemed perfect, like they had been together for years. I froze, staring at a picture of them celebrating their 4th anniversary. For years ago, he was dead. He had died in a crash I couldn't forget. My hands trembled as I scrolled through more photos. How could he betray me like this? How could he lie to everyone, including the woman who thought he was a hero? It hit me all at once. For years. He had been alive for 4 years while I mourned him, held onto the memories, and thought he was gone forever. I had buried him. I had cried for him. And all this time, he was living a different life. How could I have been so blind? I closed my eyes, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. Anger, disbelief, hurt. But most of all, I felt betrayed in a way I never thought possible. He wasn't just alive. He had moved on. My mind spun as I tried to piece together the puzzle. I looked through everything again. The posts, the photos, the tags. He wasn't just alive. He had a new identity. His new name, Daniel Carter, was an entirely different person. He had changed everything. His job, his life, his friends. He had created a completely new persona, as though Ethan Barnes never existed. Was I part of a past he wanted to erase? My stomach turned at the thought. How much of our life had been a lie? I needed more answers. I kept scrolling deeper into their shared history. And there it was, a beach wedding photo. He was wearing a white tux, holding Lisa close. Their smiles were bright, full of happiness and love. No sign of grief. No sign of the life he had abandoned. I stared at the picture in disbelief. He looked so happy. I wanted to scream. How could he move on so easily? How could he marry someone else after what we had? After everything he promised? Was I nothing to him? I wanted to believe I was mistaken, that there had to be some other explanation. But every new picture, every new detail confirmed what I feared. He had faked his death to start a new life, with someone else. He never once thought about me, or the family we built, or the love we shared. I had been the fool. I had mourned him, cried for years, and here he was, alive, with a new wife, a new life, without a care in the world. My heart shattered all over again. The betrayal was unbearable. I couldn't stop now. I needed more answers, even if it meant digging through every corner of his new life. I created a fake account on social media and started following Lisa. Every post felt like a slap to my face. There they were, happy, together. But there were moments where I saw her confusion too. She posted a picture of them together, and in the caption, she wrote, "Couldn't be happier with Daniel by my side. He makes life so much better." It felt like I was watching him replace me, piece by piece. There was something strange about Lisa. She didn't just look familiar. I knew I had seen her before. Her face was unmistakable. I searched through my memories, trying to place her. And then it hit me. Lisa had been at his funeral. I remembered the woman standing quietly in the back, looking lost in the crowd. She had been there, consoling me, pretending to be just another grieving person. I felt sick. She knew. She must have known. How long had she been a part of this twisted game? I dug deeper into her profile, and then it all came rushing back. Lisa wasn't just a stranger. She was a coworker of his. I remembered her from an office party years ago. She had been so friendly, laughing and chatting with everyone, but I had never thought anything of it. She seemed so normal, so innocent. Now, I saw the truth. She had been a part of his life while I had been living in the past, mourning a man who had moved on without me. I wanted to confront her, to scream, but I had to be careful. Was she complicit in all of this? Or had she been lied to, just like me? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I sent her a message, using my burner account. "Hey, Lisa. I think we've met before. I believe we were both at Ethan's funeral. Do you remember?" I hit send, heart racing. What would she say? Would she deny it? Or would she admit everything? I didn't know what I was expecting, but whatever her answer was, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Hours passed, and there was no reply. I couldn't focus. My mind raced with possibilities. What was she thinking? Was she hiding something? Then, finally, a message popped up. Hi. I'm sorry, but I don't think we met. Ethan wasn't a part of my life before. He had already passed by the time we got together. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I felt the room spin. She didn't know. Or did she? I could feel my anger boiling over, but I had to keep calm. Something wasn't right. Lisa's response didn't make sense. I had been at his funeral. She had been there, too, standing quietly. How could she not remember? I pressed on, feeling a surge of frustration. Are you sure? You were at his funeral. I know you were. I hit send, watching the dots appear as she typed a reply. Moments later, she sent a message back. I don't remember. It's a small world, I guess. I can't recall every person at a funeral. I couldn't shake the feeling she was hiding something. This wasn't adding up. Her message only deepened the confusion. If she didn't remember, was she being honest? Or was this all part of the deception? Maybe she wasn't involved at all. Maybe she had no idea what was really happening. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt the weight of the lies closing in. Was I making something out of nothing? Had my mind betrayed me in my search for answers? I couldn't rest, couldn't stop, not until I knew the truth. And I would get it, one way or another. I couldn't let it go. Something in me told me that Lisa had to know more than she was letting on. I had already gone this far, so what was one more step? I sent her a picture of Ethan, the one we took on our last anniversary. The one where he held me close and whispered that he loved me. This is Ethan, my husband. You were at his funeral, weren't you? I hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for her reply. This was it. Either I'd get the answers I needed, or everything would fall apart. The response came quickly. Oh my God, you're right. I remember now. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to believe it, but Ethan, or Daniel, is alive. He left me a while ago. After everything with the accident, my blood ran cold. He left her? He had been lying to both of us? I read the message over and over, trying to process the words. He wasn't just pretending to be dead. He had been with her all along. She didn't know everything, but she knew enough. And that was all I needed. Lisa was in shock, just as I was. I never knew the full truth. He told me you two were divorced. He said he was starting fresh. He told me everything about the accident, but not the truth. Not his truth. I didn't know, I swear. I couldn't hold back the tears. He had been lying to her, just like he had lied to me. She wasn't in on it. She had been manipulated. But the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. He wasn't just starting over. He was running away from the life he had built with me. It wasn't just one lie. It was a web of lies that he had spun to cover his tracks. He had told her we were divorced before the crash, and that we had no connection. He had erased me from his story completely. My anger flared again, but this time, it wasn't at Lisa. It was at him, at the man I had loved, trusted, and spent my life with. He had taken everything from me, the life we built, the memories we shared. And now, he had the audacity to do the same with her. I needed more. I couldn't just sit and wait anymore. I had to know where he was, what he was doing. My search for the truth led me down dark corners of the internet, tracking his every move. I found his new address, his phone number, and his new job. It felt like I was unraveling a mystery, except this was my life. This was the man who had been my husband, the man who had once been my everything. I wasn't going to sit idly by. I was going to confront him. He owed me that much. The address led me to a beautiful suburban neighborhood. My heart raced as I pulled up, feeling like a stranger in a place that should have felt familiar. I walked up to the door, knocked firmly, and waited. The door opened slowly, and there he was, Daniel Carter, looking exactly like Ethan. His eyes widened when he saw me. He tried to close the door, but I pushed it open, refusing to be ignored any longer. We need to talk, I demanded, trying to hold back the storm brewing inside me. He stood there, speechless, before his eyes hardened with recognition. What do you want? His voice was cold, distant. It didn't sound like the man I once knew. You faked your death, I spat. You left me. Why? After everything we had? His face turned pale, but his expression never softened. I don't owe you anything. You don't get to invade my life like this. His words were like a slap, and I recoiled. He wasn't the man I had loved. He wasn't even the man I had mourned. Don't contact me again, Daniel snapped. I'm not Ethan. I'm Daniel Carter now, and I'm happy. Leave me out of your life. I felt a flood of emotion crash over me. Anger, hurt, betrayal, disbelief. He had rebuilt himself, started over, and now he had the nerve to tell me to go away. You think you can just erase me? Pretend we never happened? My voice cracked with emotion, but he didn't flinch. He just stood there, cold and indifferent, the man who once promised me forever. He was gone. Daniel's cold stare burned into me, and I felt a pit form in my stomach. I'm sorry, but we're done. I'm happy now, he said, his voice firm. I couldn't comprehend it. How could he just erase everything we had? My heart ached with every word he said. What about everything we built? I whispered, my voice trembling. His expression didn't change. That was a different life. It's over. The door slammed in my face. I stood there, numb, knowing I had no closure. He had moved on, but I was left in the past. I spent days thinking about that moment. How could he do this to me? How could he just walk away after everything? I couldn't let it go. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to understand his coldness. What had I missed? What had happened to the man I married? I was consumed by the need for answers, for closure, for the truth. I had been a fool to believe that the love we shared could just disappear. He was my life, and I wasn't going to let him walk away again. Just when I thought I couldn't dig any deeper, an unexpected message popped up in my inbox. It was from a mutual friend, someone who had worked with Daniel for years before everything fell apart. I know what happened. I owe you the truth. The message was short, but it was enough to make my heart race. Finally, someone was going to tell me what had really happened. I quickly typed a response. Please. I need to know everything. My hands shook as I waited for the reply, my hope rising. The message I received was a bombshell. Daniel didn't just fake his death. He faked it to escape something much darker. He was in too deep with some shady people, and faking his death was the only way out. The crash was staged. My head spun as I read the words. Daniel hadn't just abandoned me for a new life. He had been running from something dangerous. The man I thought I knew had been hiding more than I could ever imagine. This was bigger than just betrayal. It was a lie that cost me everything. The more I read, the worse it got. The shady people he was involved with, drug dealers, money launderers, threats that had pushed him to the edge. His faked death was his escape plan, and I had unknowingly been part of his cover. All those years of grief, the funeral, the pain, I had been living in a lie. He had never died. He had just run away. He didn't want to deal with the consequences of his actions. He didn't want me to know. And all this time, I had been the fool. I couldn't breathe as the full scope of his lies hit me. He had never planned to return. He hadn't been lost or confused. He had been escaping. My husband wasn't a victim of a terrible accident. He had been a coward. He didn't want to face me, didn't want to face what he had done. I had been part of his escape plan, a lie so elaborate that even I didn't see it. How could I have been so blind? I had mourned a man who had no intention of ever coming back. Armed with this new knowledge, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I tracked Daniel down once more, determined to get the truth. He had made a mistake if he thought he could just walk away without facing me. I knocked on his door again, this time ready for whatever he had to say. But when he opened it, his face was a mix of anger and fear. You need to leave, he said, his voice trembling. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I know everything, and you owe me an explanation, I replied, my voice steady. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He tried to back away, but I stepped forward, not allowing him to shut me out again. You owe me the truth, I repeated, my voice unwavering. Why did you do this? Why leave me behind? What did you think was going to happen? Daniel's face turned pale, his lips trembling. You don't understand, he whispered. I did it to protect you. I thought you would be better off without me. I didn't want to drag you into the mess I created. But his words didn't feel like an apology. They felt like an excuse. Daniel's confession was as heartbreaking as it was damning. I was in over my head. I owed money to people who didn't care who they hurt. They wanted me to do things I couldn't, but I didn't want you to get hurt. Faking my death was the only way out. I had no choice. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. I'm sorry. I didn't want to destroy you, but I thought it was the only way to save you. I listened in stunned silence. The man I had loved wasn't a hero. He was a man who had chosen to lie and leave me behind. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Sadness? Relief? The truth felt like a punch to the gut. All these years of pain, of loss, of wondering why he was gone, had been a lie. He wasn't a victim. He was a man who had made a choice. He had chosen to leave me. He had chosen to betray me in the worst possible way. And yet, here he was, standing in front of me, asking for forgiveness. But how could I forgive him? How could I ever trust him again after everything he had done? The guilt in Daniel's eyes was palpable. He looked like he had aged a decade in the time it took me to process what he had said. I didn't want to hurt you, he repeated, his voice low. I thought you'd be better off without me. I thought I could make a clean break and never come back. The words sounded hollow, empty. He had destroyed everything we had, everything I thought was real. And now, he was standing here, expecting me to forgive him. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not after everything. Daniel's voice broke as he spoke again. I thought if I could just escape everything, I could rebuild my life. I thought I could live without the guilt of dragging you into my mess. His words were desperate, but they didn't soften the anger building inside me. He wasn't just trying to protect me. He was running from the consequences of his actions. I had been a part of his escape plan, a pawn in his game. You think you can just erase all of this? I asked, shaking my head. You can't erase me, Daniel. Every word out of his mouth only made me angrier. I felt a surge of emotions, betrayal, hurt, fury. How dare he? How could he stand there and tell me he was protecting me? He hadn't protected me. He had abandoned me. I had mourned him, thought I had lost him, and all the while, he was living a lie. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. You don't get to decide what's best for me, I snapped, my voice shaking with rage. You don't get to come back and expect forgiveness. His face paled. The silence between us was thick and uncomfortable. Daniel stood there, his eyes pleading with me, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. He had shattered my trust, torn apart the life we once shared. I had no idea who this man was standing in front of me. He wasn't the man I married, the man I loved. He was someone else. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't just mourn him. I mourned the idea of him. The man I thought I knew had never truly existed. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice cracking as I turned to walk away. My heart felt like it was shattering into pieces, but I knew I had to leave. There was no point in staying. No point in listening to his apologies. I had to walk away, for my own sanity, for my own healing. Daniel reached out as I turned, but I pulled away, not wanting to feel his touch. Goodbye, Daniel, I whispered, the weight of those words crushing me. Goodbye, Ethan. And with that, I walked out of his life, forever. Leaving him behind was the hardest thing I had ever done. As I walked away from that door, I felt like I was leaving a piece of myself behind. But I knew it was the right decision. He wasn't the man I thought he was. He was a stranger who had hurt me beyond words. The love we shared was gone. And as much as it pained me, I had to let go. I had to move on from the past, even if it meant saying goodbye to everything I once believed in. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I focused on rebuilding my life, piece by piece. It wasn't easy. I had to confront the pain and betrayal, but slowly, I began to heal. I found strength in the people around me. Friends, family, and even strangers who understood my pain. It was a long road, but I wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. The man I loved was gone, but I was still here, and I would be okay. I started doing things for myself, things I had put aside for so long. I rediscovered my passion for painting, something I hadn't touched in years. I went back to school, started meeting new people, and began to trust again. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't defined by the man who had left me behind. I was defined by my strength to move forward. The more I embraced my new life, the more I realized that I didn't need him. I had always been enough. One day, months after I had walked away from Daniel, I received a letter in the mail. It was from him. I opened it slowly, bracing myself. I know I can't undo the past. It began. But I'm sorry for everything. I was a coward, and I'll always regret what I did to you. You deserved so much more than I gave you. I hope one day you can find peace. The letter wasn't an apology I needed, but I realized it was the closure I had been searching for. The chapter of my life with Daniel was finally closed, and I could move on. I didn't need to look back anymore. Daniel had made his choice, and I had made mine. I wasn't the same woman who had mourned him, who had spent years wondering what went wrong. I had grown. I had healed. And as I stood on the edge of my new life, I realized that I was stronger than I had ever been. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor. The woman I had become was someone proud of her journey, and I was ready for whatever came next. The future was mine. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you like the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.